Thank you, listeners. You're joining us for our Elko Live edition today, in which we're getting caught up with Elko City Police Department news and issues with our Police Lieutenant, Rick Moore, who joins us, and he is the Public Information Officer for the PD. And you're also there to help give the administrators, like the police chief, a little break when they need a vacation too, right, Rick?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Chief Trouton definitely works hard, and he's got 2 weeks off right now, so it's much earned.
Well, nice. And you're, again, stepping into his shoes with the other administrators, and everybody gets to see how difficult everybody else's job is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So obviously we'll get caught up on some summertime issues. The Elko Police Department is about to launch, or has launched, this new online, a new app that you can download on your mobile device, Lieutenant, and it's super easy. I just did it while we were sitting here because I said, I didn't know about that. And you can contact the PD directly. You can submit tips. You can find a list of Elko areas most wanted, as well as registered sex offenders. There are all kinds of things that you can do with this.
Yeah, this is a fantastic new tool. Everybody's familiar with social media, and we have our Facebook presence also. Longer-term listeners might remember the Nixle program that we had several years ago. So if there was a community emergency or something, we're able to put information out. This is going to take the place of that and actually add more information. It's a free app. If you have an Android-based phone, it's just on Google Play. Go to your Google Play and download the app. If you have an iPhone, it's just through your app store. Takes just a couple minutes. Lori and I just actually sat down here and she just did it. So easy. We're still in the process of populating a lot of the information, but like she said, there's a ton of information here from the chief's message. And some of the stuff that we are putting in is, Elko's Most Wanted, missing persons and cold cases. We still have homicides that are unsolved out there, missing persons. We're still looking for who killed Richard Lawson. We're still looking for who killed Jose Gomez. Those two come to mind immediately. Still looking for William Ravenel, and these are over the span of at least a decade. So all that'll be in there, and just keep that as fresh as possible in people's minds. If you do have information for safe voice, like there's a student or somebody that wants to hurt themselves or hurt somebody else, that's an avenue to get that information out and get it to us, as well as tracking our sex offenders. If you have a complaint or accommodation for an officer, that's available also. And then going forward, all of our press releases will actually be funneled through this. We'll still maintain our Facebook presence, but this is going to take the majority of what we put out to the public.
Again, it's convenient. It's the Elko Police Department app. You can go to your app store, depending on which device you use. And again, you'll find many categories. And as Lieutenant Moore described, it's still being populated. So even just pulling up things right now, we're not seeing a ton yet, but you do see the different categories. Like you can offer commendations for someone within the police department, or if you do have a concern, obviously there's a tab for filing a complaint.
Absolutely.
So that's on there. Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about this.
Yes. And then we also want to make sure, as you said, that people know that they can still go directly to the website to file online crime reports.
Yeah, you can still go to our city website and file that through obviously any online platform. We also have a kiosk set up in the front lobby of our police department. You can actually come to the police department and that's all ready to go. Touch screen, fill out what you need to, or you can always call a police officer or come down to the station.
Everybody is super helpful. The police station is located at 1448 Silver Street on that same stretch as the Igloo, our youth recreation center in Elko. The number to call is 775-777-7310. That's the non-emergency, right?
That goes straight to the front office. Yeah, for non-emergency dispatch after hours, it's 777-7300.
Okay, and that's an important number to have too, because sometimes, people are hesitant to call 911, and maybe from your experience, Lieutenant, you can describe some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to using 911.
So 911 for us is literally life and death. If you're tying up the 911 emergency telephone line, there could literally be somebody trying to call in with a life and death emergency that you're, tying that up to, complain about your neighbor or something that isn't an emergency. So please. And the dispatchers are really good at that too. If they immediately identify this isn't a life or death, they'll call the non-emergency number and hang up on them. And what unfortunately we've had citizens also push the issue and call 911 right back. Just understand what you're doing to the rest of your fellow citizens by doing that. it could mean the difference between life and death, somebody not being able to get that call out.
Right. So it's very important that you do report suspicious activity, but if it's not an emergency, and this is something to teach your family members too, because we do want children to respond appropriately in times of emergency, to know their name, their address, to be able to describe the type of emergency by dialing 911.
Absolutely. The sooner that these children are able to learn that information, you don't know when they're going to need it. So it's better to teach them young, and if the time does come, then they'll have that readily available.
I remember in preschool that they used to teach using toy telephones, and now everything's obviously on a cell phone, but it's pretty easy to do that with your youngster. They kind of have fun with the interaction.
Yeah, and most of those kids out there today probably know their cell phones better than I do. So.
Yes, definitely. So again, the non-emergency number to report suspicious but yet not emergency activity goes to Central Dispatch at 775-777-7300. That's after hours. But you can also use these online crime reporting apps or go to the website to just type in your details. And I guess it's a good segue, Lieutenant, into what we wanted to talk about too, people securing and recording their valuables, because unfortunately theft is still quite common.
So the Crime Suppression Unit put out a public service announcement that we posted on our Facebook page a few days ago, because they see it all the time. We go into houses that we know it has stolen property, but we can't prove it. Therefore, we don't have the legal ability to seize it. So we knowingly walk out of houses that we just can't prove that this stuff's stolen. We know that it's stolen, but we can't prove it. So we put out a public safety service announcement, asking people just to put a unique identifier on their tools. If it's, scratch their name into it, we've recovered stolen property and actually got it back to the owners just based on that. Just a unique identifier, cataloging their serial numbers, cataloging their IMEIs on their cell phones. Some way for us to identify it if we do come across it, to get it back to its rightful owner.
Obviously, the first best thing to do to prevent theft is to secure it, right?
Yeah, Elko is a very safe community, and we do have the mindset, though, that, I've left my door unlocked for 30 years, nothing's ever happened until it does. So the harder target that you can make yourself, the better. I've watched a lot of video over the years, people walking up to vehicles and just checking door handles, and if they don't have an easy target, they move on. However, if they're given that ability to open that door, then you've just essentially invited them in. And we don't put that on the victims. We do our very best to keep these people off the street, but just harden yourself as a target.
And then along those same lines, if you are the victim, don't hesitate to report it, right? Because police need to have this information.
We do. It might be inconsequential to you, or just like, oh, this is just an annoyance. But we don't know how many other people have been hit. You might have the linchpin to the case to put, to hold these people accountable. So if this happened, 15 different people, but you have a snippet of video or whatever the case might be that can crack all those cases, you've really helped out your community, helped out us to help you help the community.
And that's another important point. We've seen a lot of citizens, even, in the last 5 years or so, installing security devices, things that are as simple as a Ring doorbell, and those are good tools?
Absolutely. I have them myself. I would suggest that everybody has them. If anything, it's a deterrent. I've seen these people walk up, faces covered and everything, and see that camera and just move on, because it goes back to what I was saying before, just making yourself a little bit harder target than the next person.
And it's definitely probably more affordable than you think. The installation's fairly easily. And then if you do end up being the victim of a crime, you've done everything to secure the property, it was stolen, hopefully you've recorded the information, then that's the next step to reclaiming it, right? That you can get your stuff back.
Yeah, absolutely. File the report. Let us catalog the information, put it into our system. Once it's put into our system, depending on the type of property that's stolen, that actually goes into our Leads Online system, which hits all the pawn shops throughout the nation. So that goes into our NCIC, and so you might have a high-end amp or something stolen in Elko, and it pops hot, Newark or something like that. We've had cases just across the country and across years. So you might think might not be any traction by reporting it, but it's amazing to me sometimes how many things we can recover with the right information.
So if it's valuable to you, even if that value is insentimental, it's jewelry, or of course in the most serious case, Lieutenant, we know when guns are stolen, they are often used to commit crimes.
That's right. Yeah, guns, unfortunately there's quite a few guns stolen in this community. It's very important to try to keep those as locked up as good as possible, catalog those serial numbers. And, another option is, it used to have to cost film. It doesn't cost anything now with our phones. Just take a photograph of it and have that potentially maybe downloaded on a thumb drive in a safe or something somewhere. So if it does, unfortunate happens, you have that information.
Right. And so, again, securing your property, report crime, report suspicious activity, and then do your best to try to reclaim those valuables. Those are just some tips from our Elko Police Lieutenant Rick Moore today, who's in giving us an update on local law enforcement news. We did want to talk about some crime trends and again offer many, many thanks to the Crime Suppression Unit. Yet another success story and continued ongoing efforts in really focusing in on groups of people that have seemed to perfect this opportunity, to occupy homes or houses, and they're just perpetuating all kinds of crimes, Lieutenant. It affects neighborhoods.
It does, and it's frustrating from the uniform patrol standpoint, where you get the information. Everybody's watching for the marked patrol car. We're very happy with what the Crime Suppression Unit has been able to accomplish. They're out there creeping. You don't know where they're going to be at. They're in a modified uniform. The vehicle is dependent on the mission for the day. So we recently had a search warrant. They were able to execute and recover stolen property and drugs from a burglary that had occurred several streets down. Conducted surveillance, known players in the game to them. They were able to really make an effective change and help the neighborhood, because we've already got positive feedback from people that are in the neighborhood. So they're out there. Very, very happy that they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah, that's important. And they're also working on things, collaborating with other agencies. For example, what comes to mind, Lieutenant, is helping the city of Elko code enforcement with the issue of the Elko Inn there at 8th and Idaho.
That's a hot button topic with City Council right now. They're working on getting that cleaned up. It is essentially a blight on the main city street of our town. A lot of illegal activity there. Property thefts property being stored there, drug activity, and so our Crime Suppression Unit has helped with that. And then ultimately it'll be up to City Council to be able to permanently rectify that, hopefully sooner than later.
Yep. And it is not an easy process. Even if you see or believe you're witnessing a crime that's being committed, something criminal is going on, there are still Fourth Amendment rights afforded to every citizen in this country.
We don't take that lightly. That Constitution exists for a reason, and we're going to do it the right way.
Mm-hmm. And that's to be secure in your homes and your private property. And so sometimes when it takes police weeks, if not months, it's because they're literally following every single lead and angle so that they can strengthen the case, so that the charges can be as maximum as possible.
That's right. Ultimately, we just care about the safety of the community. If we can get an offender to not offend, that's all we're doing. That could be either the carrot or the stick. If the stick is, in prison and it's what protects the rest of the community, so be it. If that offender has, a drug problem or something along those lines, and we can get them treatment, then absolutely. Or mental health issues, that's a lot of times exacerbated by the drug use. If that's the avenue we can go down, I'd be much happier doing that. We don't have any societal interest in just putting people in prison. We want them to not offend and protect the community at large.
And that, again, illustrates that cycle. Some people listening may think, well, drugs are a victim of crime, but the reality is if someone has an addiction, and it could be alcohol, could be any kind of an addiction that starts to interfere with their ability to function, to do their jobs, to contribute to their families?
I think the quickest way to understand that is to actually have a conversation with a family member with somebody that was an addict, and see that spiral essentially to where they hit the point that they're literally stealing from their family members, and how that tears a family apart. So any part of the process in that spiral, if that can be affected by either law enforcement, church groups, behavioral health units, or family members, is a good thing, because victim is crime until they're stealing and breaking in windows and doors and everything else just to feed that habit.
Yep, they are disruptive to, as you mentioned, first their families, and then it can extend to their communities, and then obviously costing people their property and their property values in some cases. So those are probably the lesser of the crimes. It's more than a nuisance because these are valuables to some people. We know the thresholds have been changed by Nevada lawmakers. Do you feel like sometimes there's more of everything? I feel like in Elko right now, there's a lot of road rage. I see it a couple times a week.
I think that society's facing a lot of pressures from a lot of different places, and we just went through the pandemic, and that didn't help anybody's mental health at all on any level, I don't think, and finally it looks like we're on the other side of that. But everybody feels that. I think it is worsened by just the amount of information I guess we have at the touch of our fingertips. We can get on and see something bad that happened in Tennessee, or whatever the case may be across the world, and we have an empathy for somebody that's sitting in a submersible, at the Titanic. There's a personification, a personal feeling for anybody that's suffering anywhere. So it's just, made worse. I guess you take that in internally, and then you tend to lash out when it reaches a boiling point for you.
I'm glad you brought that up because we do know that both police and firefighters, the Firefighters Association had their conference here, and they hosted a special session just on helping families, community members, people understand the toll that this takes on a first responder.
Yeah, there's that. You really don't understand exactly how much a lot of this affects you until, it reaches a boiling point to some people. Becoming more an open conversation, I guess, in my field. 23 years ago, it wasn't as looked at the way it is today. And I see that only as a good thing. And not only for just first responders, just society in general. Everybody out there is faced with a lot more stress. There's stressors, new ones coming all the time. If you're feeling that, there's avenues for help, and just walking through that door, maybe giving yourself the opportunity to accept that help is can only be potentially a positive thing, right?
And we also see more transparency within police departments and other services. I'm thinking of the body cam footage in particular, Lieutenant. I've seen quite a few body cam officer-involved shootings, mainly on the KSL.com website. That's one of the sources that I aggregate for news, and it's always sort of heart-stopping, and it does give you that perspective of just how serious this is every single day.
It is, yeah, and transparency is a huge topic for us, body cams being one avenue, and that way people can see it played back. But you just have to understand when you're watching a body cam, we don't know how that body camera ends when we're in that body cam. It might look like television, and it's not. It's happening right now until it becomes television. Trying to get into the mindset of where that officer is and what his intention is. Because a lot of times the action that's played out, I can guarantee you, if you were to get in that officer's mind, that intention for that to play out the way it did isn't. A lot of variables to try to control when, it's going down right now.
Absolutely. And I think what you're alluding to too is just, editing, whether for time or for content, but you have to consider that as well, as that there was a beginning call to an incident, something was happening before police were ever notified, and then when police get there, it's sort of how that interaction plays out. Yeah,
we control very little of that. A lot of the circumstances we're placed into is dictated by somebody else. It's dictated by the person placing the call, it's dictated by the call taker, and then ultimately it's dictated by the interaction that we end up with on the street.
Right. Police officers are the ultimate in reacting to a situation. So that's why so much of this prevention, reaction, we're working on the transparency so that people are better in reporting crime and maybe not making assumptions, but helping to give police as much information as they can. And that's why some of these apps that we talk about, and you've launched a podcast as well.
Yeah, so talking about transparency, I want to try to let people get into the mind of the officers as much as possible and see why they're formulating some of the decisions they do if they're having questions, and best way to do that's a lot of times is conversation. We always, we encourage the ride-along program as far as face-to-face citizen interaction, but we have launched a podcast that's published through Spotify on our Facebook page. Episode 2 was day before yesterday. I interviewed Officer Jacob Belinsky. He came to us from Las Vegas Metro, doing a really good job, and it's interesting to see just his perspective coming from a much larger community, much larger department, how that's meshing with our community and in our department. he's got nothing good, nothing bad at all to say about Elko. He loves it. He came here to raise his family because he believes in the community and ultimately the police department. And he's been a very valuable asset up until now.
And we've welcomed officers who've come from other communities, and many of them for that very reason. I think it might be safe to say, Lieutenant, that you've been doing this, as you said, for 23 years, and I've been doing it for longer than that, or being, in this seat. And I think, from my perspective, we've been pretty spoiled. I mean, we've had bumps and bruises along the way, but as a community,
I think so. I mean, one of the reasons that we have some of the units that we have is due to geographic isolation. I think that works in our favor to a large amount also, because we do have an encapsulated with all the outside stressors and pressures and everything else that comes with being on an I-80 corridor and everything else. But we are spoiled. I mean, we live in a very safe community. I mean, there's the things that you see in the news that pop off once again, but that's not every day. That's not every half hour, so yeah.
Even in the news business, it used to be that we would report almost every little tiny thing, and it was to the point where people would be annoyed, saying, "Do you really have to report DUIs?" And we would say, "Well, that's kind of what the issue is in the community right now. We have 5 DUIs in a weekend."
Yeah.
And now we rarely report a DUI unless it results in an injury or death.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, that's all still happening out there, but...
it is,
yeah.
Yes. Domestic violence is huge. I mean, it seems like we're not getting a break from the crimes that people perpetuate against one another, Lieutenant, and shocking crimes against children.
Oh, unfortunately, that's been the major caseload with our general detectives is the child crimes. The Child Advocacy Center hopefully is going to be open by the end of next month. I keep getting different time frames when that might be open, but so good for the community, just great. As far as the smaller crimes against people, we are somewhat frustrated with some of the law changes. There's a broken windows theory of law enforcement that if you stop the smaller stuff, the bigger stuff doesn't happen, or it kind of takes care of itself. And we're seeing a kind of a shift in that. So we're trying to mitigate how that affects the community as much as possible. But
with the crime suppression unit, right?
That's it. So it comes down to limited resources and I say being more surgical in the application of those limited resources to try to be the most effective. Are things falling to the left and the right of our core mission? Absolutely. But as long as we're being more effective with our core mission and trying to make the community as safe as possible and take the offenders off that are constantly reoffending to where they actually get some time and protect the community from them, unfortunately, I don't know how else to word that. That's where we're at.
Well, and again, just sort of getting back to the crimes against children or domestic violence, I know there are people out there saying this. What is wrong with people? I mean, what is going on? Is it?
I don't know. If you ever answer that question, let me know. I don't think I'm necessarily shocked anymore by what I've heard, but it's still just like, what in the world, I put out a press release just recently where a father was hiding a video camera in his daughter's bathroom and bedroom. And what drives somebody to do that? It's so far outside the realm of what anybody would consider normal. I don't know the answer to that.
Right. And then we've seen just out on, West Bullion, there's a homicide that's being investigated, child endangerment.
Yeah, the Elko County Sheriff's Office is in the process of investigating a homicide. The details of that I cannot speak to. I know that our detective unit and their detective unit are beginning to work much more closely. We have a really good relationship with the Sheriff's Office Investigation Division, and they have strengths that complement our weaknesses and vice versa. And we were able to send one of our detectives out there with some technology and assist them. Where that investigation is, I don't know. I know one person's dead and family's destroyed right now. So.
All right. Thank you, obviously, Lieutenant. And that does underscore the significance of collaborating, working together with whether it's, we still have an NDI, right?
We do. We have the Elko Combined Narcotics Unit headed by NDI. We have one of our members up there, extremely motivated individual, doing some really good work, making some good cases, more cases to come, working hand in hand with the Crime Suppression Unit, our detective unit, and our patrol. And just because the property crimes, the crimes against persons, they all have a nexus to narcotics. Well, I should say a lot of them have a nexus to narcotics. So the more effective we're on every front of those facets, the better off we're going to be ultimately as a law enforcement entity.
So again, it's important to report crimes, whether you're studying the app online that you can download, the Elko Police Department app. You can make reports in person at the kiosk there at 1448 Silver Street during business hours. You can call and have an officer come to your home, which is also, super easy. And, it'll happen quite readily as long as you're not super busy, right? I mean, we still have the benefit of that. Big cities, right. Officers don't come to your house anymore.
Right. Yeah, you get into a fender bender, downtown Vegas, good luck getting an officer there, that kind of thing. We still are able to provide that service to the community for the most part.
So if you're listening and thinking of ways that you can give back and help contribute to the effort, let your Elko city leaders know, the city council, because when the police come to them for tools, for additional officers, this is the kind of thing that they need to hear, that's a priority.
That's it, yeah. Like right now, we're in the process of hiring 2 evidence techs. We just had 2 evidence techs leave us, so that puts our ability to get body cam footage out and the redaction, everything that occurs is stopped. But we need more people as the technology and all the stuff that's put onto us. We need people to be able to do those jobs, to provide that service to the community.
Talking with our Elko Police Lieutenant Rick Moore on our Elko Live today, and covered a lot of different topics, and we did want to kind of touch briefly on before we close out with some more of the outreach and the special events that are coming up. But as you had alluded to, there are a few unsolved crimes, and there are ways for people to contribute information, right? Even though it's a so-called cold case.
That's right. Like homicides, they're never closed until the person's in prison, right? So we're still looking for the killer. Richard Lawson happened several years ago. Jose Gomez, same time period. Still looking for a missing person, William Ravenel. And that's the ones that just come to my mind because that's the ones that I've been involved in. And there'll be more. We're looking at ways to try to get fresh eyes on those cold cases by maybe bringing in retired detectives. So if any of your listeners are out there, maybe from another agency or something, retired, on a side gig, come on down to the police department. We might be able to help you out, as well as help us out.
Absolutely. Help the community and help the families.
Yeah.
Again, it's really tragic to have either a missing person, a cold case, someone who's been taken from you violently, and then to also, have that continued fear. There's always a connection to that crime.
There is. If they're out there, we don't know what's going to happen next.
And with the new technology, there are many advances. We've been talking with the Sheriff's Department, and they're very close to closing in on Schaffner Janes. First of all, they have been able to identify her, but not releasing that because that is tied directly to the suspect in the case. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it can happen.
Yes.
Sometimes it can take decades, but it can happen.
Yes.
So, and the community is ready to help and to use that information. So if you want to support or find out more about your police department, you're one of the many first responders who will be on hand for an August event called National Night Out.
We've had this for several years now, National Night Out. It's a nationwide event. That'll be the first Tuesday in August. It's always the first Tuesday in August. This year it falls on August 1st. We'll be out there. We'll have our canines, SWAT, bomb, CNT, and I'll be flipping burgers, actually. That'll be my job. So, and then Wells has a similar event also. I don't know what assets we're going to be able to send over there, but that's in discussion right now, but come on down. Also, August 5th, Global One Media is having an event in the Main City Park too. Our part, we're going to have at least one officer there just doing little fingerprint things for the kids and talking. I don't know exactly what Global One has planned, but anything to get out there in the public is definitely a good thing.
Yeah, we like to help support our broadcast partners anytime they're enhancing outreach in the community and access to our responders, emergency services, and again, just a way to say thanks for everything that you're doing. And I hope we got to most of your topics today. I mean, we're still a minute or so underneath. Can you believe it? So, yeah.
All right. Well, if we didn't get to everything today, I'd be more than happy to be on next month.
Oh, that would be great. We appreciate it. And I know Police Chief Ty Troughton appreciates it too, and as do your counterparts. We had ITOR last week. Usually our law enforcement show is, like the last Thursday of the month, but on these longer months, sometimes we get a little bonus. So last week we had ITOR in, but I think that's a good point too. You're working closely with the Sheriff's Office, police are, and as well as Nevada State Police.
Nevada State Police, Nevada Division of Investigation. We reach out to West Windover when we need to, Carlin PD. I mean, this is a collaborative effort regionally and beyond that in reality.
parole and probation, juvenile detention.
Yeah, we could rattle off a whole bunch of agencies here.
Yeah. And again, with our district attorney, Tyler Ingram, and his efforts to, as you said, that Great Basin Child Advocacy Center, it will open soon. It's just, and in all fairness, I think some of those supply issues have affected a lot of big building projects.
Yeah. Supply chain is causing issues across all sectors, including that. I know that we have moved in the furniture there, so I mean, it's right on the cusp. Just got to get it staffed and get it moving.
All right. And that'll be in a very busy location. We know the city is moving in on the Boys and Girls Clubs rebuilding the city swimming pool in about the same location. So expect great things coming in that, and we'll still have our city park too.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you so much, our Elko Police Lieutenant Rick Moore, Public Information Officer for the City of Elko Police Department. Remember, the Elko PD is located at 1448 Silver Street. 775-777-7310 is the non-emergency office number. And then after office hours, to report suspicious activity to dispatch, that's not an emergency, 775-777-7300. And a shout out to dispatchers. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
We couldn't do our job without them.
Absolutely. And our neighborhood really appreciates the work of our dispatch. They are on 24/7, and they give a very kind, considerate, professional service. Thank you. Thank you, listeners, for joining us for today's radio program, Elko Live, here on KELK.